Hey everybody, I'm not going to be in today and I'm not sick this time, so that's great, but my dog is sick and I've got to take him to the vet today. So I just wanted to go over what you're going to be working on today in class. We've got a little bit more of our notes to take and then we've got a practice to work on. So today we're going to be going over embryology and comparative anatomy. There are two other forms of evidence that we have that help support the theory of evolution. So we're going to start with going over those. And we're starting on slide either 18 or 19. All right. So these forms of evidence should be a little bit familiar because of the the practice you worked on yesterday. But let's just talk real quick about embryology. Embryology is the comparison of developmental stages between organisms. So we're looking at living things, specifically animals, in the earliest stages of development. So either when it's in vitro, meaning still in the womb, or when it is in the egg. So looking at these images, which one do you think is the human? If we had this one being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which one would develop into a human? This is the next stages, so knowing this, we could probably rule out these two. Don't think those are human, but these all still kind of look the same. These two are fairly similar, and then these ones are fairly similar. And as it turns out, the very last one is the human. So the point of embryology is saying that all of these organisms start off fairly similar, but then develop into things that are totally different. Embryology is the study of embryos and these similarities in features that are found in vertebrates, so things with the spinal cord, suggest that there is a common ancestor. A common ancestor is an individual from which all organisms in a group are descended. The next bit of evidence of evolution is comparative anatomy. It is comparing the structures of organisms, so body parts, bones, similarities in structures found in the body. There's two types of structures that we need to know. Don't worry about vestigial structures just yet. The first one is homologous structures. If you remember when we talked about alleles, homozygous meant two of the same alleles. Homologous structures mean they have similar structures but different functions. So I would write that down in my notes. Homologous structures equals similar structure, different function. So again, homologous structures, similar structure, different function. And we get these from divergent evolution, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So this is an example of homologous structures. We've got bones in a human arm, and we have the humerus, the radius, the ulna, the carpals, the metacarpals, the phalanges. Cats, whales, and bats also have those same bones, so similar structure, but the limbs of a cat and the fins of a whale and the wings of the bat are used for different things than what a human arm is used for. So similar structure, different function. That's homologous. The next one is analogous. Analogous is the opposite. So it's the same function, but a different structure. And the examples we have are the wings of an insect compared to the wings of the bird, compared to the wings of the bat. All three of those things are made up of different structures, but they're all used for the same thing. They are used for flight. So analogous structures is similar function, different structure. Now, how we get homologous and analogous structures depends on the type of evolution. Divergent evolution leads to homologous structures. So we start with a common ancestor and then we have variations in our adaptations, so they're diverging, they're moving away from each other. Convergent evolution is what's going to give us our analogous structures. So two things that are not related, like the fly and the bird, both face the same problem. They need a mode of transportation, or they need a means of getting away or finding their food. They're having the same environmental pressures, which causes them to both adapt the ability to fly. They don't have the same structures inside, but they had the same environmental pressures that caused them to evolve in similar ways. So that's convergent evolution. This is an example of convergent evolution. So we have animals that are similar, that have a common ancestor, but that are slightly different. Coevolution is when two independent species evolve together to meet mutual needs. So in this example, we have things that need to be pollinated, aka plants, and then we have pollinators. So let's look at this hummingbird. Hummingbirds have adapted and evolved to have this really narrow beak and a really long tongue, like disproportionately long to their body. And these flowers have evolved to have really long bases at the bottom of the flower. The flowers are evolving in such a way that allows them to be pollinated, and the hummingbirds are evolving in such a way that allows them to have a means to eat. So these two species, independent of each other, the pollinators and the things that need to be pollinated, are evolving that is beneficial in a way that's beneficial to both species. And the last bit of information for today is vestigial structures. The only bit you really need to write down is this bullet right here. They're structures that are reduced in function but have been used by an ancestor. So things that are not used anymore in modern species. Think about your wisdom teeth. You don't need your wisdom teeth, it's a vestigial structure. You don't need your tailbone anymore, but you still have one. You don't need your appendix anymore, but you still have it. So all of those things are vestigial structures. They served a purpose in earlier versions of Homo sapiens in humans, but now we don't need them. Another really cool example is a whale. Whales have pelvic bones, and if you know, your pelvic bones are your hip bones are what connect your legs to the rest of your body. Well, whales don't have legs, so really they don't need a pelvic bone, but the baleen whale still has that bone. So it's vestigial. It's there, but it's not necessary. So with that information, if you need to go back and re-listen to it, pause it along the way so you can take your notes, go right ahead. There are two things that are due today for our practice. Let me move this over real quick. The first one is going to be this comparative anatomy practice. And again, it's a PowerPoint, so don't forget, in order to Zoom, you have to use this function here, and make sure you do File, Make a Copy. So the first thing you're going to do is define homologous structures, so go back to your notes. And then the second part is you're going to be looking at the bone structures on page 2 and then writing what their function is for each animal. So I'm going to look at the skeletons, and for the human, it's an arm, the whale, it's their forelimb, crocodile. They're all the same bones. So remember, these are homologous structures, same bones, different function. So up here, when it says, what is the function of a human arm? Tell me, what do you use your arms for? What do whales use their fins for? What do cats use their limbs for? So on and so forth. These questions are fairly easy. They're yes or no. And then this one here, H, says offer a possible evolutionary explanation for how the skeletons can be similar, but their functions can be different. So what I want you to think about here is when we say homologous structures, they're derived from what? all of these organisms share one thing, and it's a common something, and that's what you need to think about when you answer this one here. The next one is about vestigial structures. So this is talking about two different fish. You have a cave fish and a minnow. Cave fish don't have eyes, or their eyes, they're not like eyeballs, they're just like sockets. They have a remnant of an eye. But minnows do have eyes. So explain why eyesight is not an important adaptation to life in a deep sea cave. Think about deep sea. Is there any light in a deep sea cave? Assuming that there is no light in a deep sea cave, do you need eyes at that point? This next part down here is just asking you to think about vestigial structures in humans, what they were used for at one point, and explain why they've become vestigial, so why they're no longer used. So they give you the first one, the appendix. It was used in the past for digestion, but our diet has changed and we don't really need it to break down the types of food that we're eating. For this one, what do you think humans needed a tailbone for at first? What do animals need a tail for? Think about a cat. Cats are really good at balancing, right? So our tailbone could have been used for balance. Why don't we need that anymore? With our muscles that move our ears around, think about animals that are able to move their ears around. What would you need to hear at all times? Think about predators and prey. Why do we no longer need the ability to move our ears around? Muscles that make our hair stand up. Think about when you're cold and you get goosebumps, your hair stands up. Did we always have really nice sweaters and jackets? Probably not. So what was our hair used for at that point in time? Your little toe, fun fact, you don't need it. You have all of the balance you need in your big toe, and some people are actually born without their little toes anymore. And then wisdom teeth you don't need because we're not eating the same things anymore. So I've given you what their past functions were. You need to tell me why we no longer need them. And the last thing you're going to do today and submit for a practice is the homologous versus analogous structures. First question is asking you to compare the two terms. So if you don't remember, go to your notes. The second one, use the table. You're going to use the picture in the first slide to answer these questions. We're literally doing the same thing. The human, what body part is it? That's an arm. What is the arm used for? What is its function? Go on and so forth. How are all the body parts in figure 1 alike? How are they different? And then for number 2, use figure 2. What is the organism? What is the body part? And what is the function of that? So the first one is a bird. It's a wing. It's used for flying. 6 says, why are the structures in figure 1 homologous? So why are they the same structure but different function? How do you know? And then lastly, page 3 goes over vestigial structures. So that first assignment where we said the tailbone, the appendix, the wisdom teeth, all of that, you're doing the exact same thing here. If you have any questions, please send me an email. I will be able to respond to them today. Also, there are a few videos in today's lesson. So if you're having a hard time remembering the difference between homologous and analogous structures, watch this video. You do not have to do the web quest. Don't stress over it. Just get the homologous practice done and the comparative anatomy done. Again, any questions, send me an email.